Dear students, welcome back. In this part, we are going to learn how to describe pie charts. A pie chart contains different parts. It shows how a part relates to the whole. So, describing percentages and how to present percentages effectively are what we are going to learn today. First of all, let's read an example and see the sentence patterns used when we talk about percentages. This is a pie chart. It shows the marital status of adult Americans in 1970. Each category is presented by a different color. When we describe a pie chart, we can start with the largest proportion. Let's read the following example and figure out what are the useful expressions. This pie chart shows that married people accounted for the greatest proportion of the adult American population in 1970, 71%. The American adults who were never married made up 17% of the population. By contrast, people who were widowed represented 8% of the population. It is particularly noticeable that divorced couples only constituted 4% of the American population in 1970. Just as I said before, we usually begin with the largest proportion, that is, the percentage of married people in this example. We may also notice that this example contains 4 sentences, one for each category. Please pay attention to the phrase used to describe percentages in each sentence and see if you can locate them. In the first sentence, we can find the phrase account for. In the second sentence, we can find the phrase make up. In the third sentence, we can find the word represent. In the fourth sentence, we can find the word constitute. Those are useful expressions for describing percentages in pie charts. Let's have a summary. In those sentences or clauses, the subjects are the categories. For example, married people, the American adults who were never married, people who were widowed, and divorced couples. Account for, make up, represent, and constitute are predicates, followed by their percentage respectively. There are other ways for describing percentages. When A constitutes exactly 25% of the total amount, we could use the expression a quarter. Let's see an example here. The population of Europe, Latin America, North America, and Oceania accounts for a quarter of the world's population in 2000. Account for is what we have already discussed. A quarter means 25%. Meanwhile, we can say that B accounts for 3/4 of the total amount. Another example, almost 3/4 of the world's population live in Asia and Africa. Here, 3/4 means 75%. When it comprises 50% of the total amount, we can put it as A comprises half of the total amount, or simply put it as the percentage of A is 50%. Now it is your turn. Can you use what we have just learned and describe a pie chart? Let's look at the next slide. This pie chart represents reasons for using electricity. Based on what we have learned, can you apply those useful expressions in your own essay? Do it right now. Here is a sample for your reference. It is clear that the electricity is used for 4 reasons. Heating rooms and water accounts for the highest proportion, 52.5% of the total amount of electricity used, while the running of ovens, kettles, and washing machines constitutes 17.5% of the total consumption of electricity. Lightning, TV, and radio represent the same proportion, 15%, of power consumption as vacuum cleaners, food mixers, and electric tools do. The sample starts with the largest proportion, which is heating rooms and water. Then it describes 4 parts respectively. The last 2 parts are the same, so the sample compares the two by using as. We are going to elaborate this point in the next part, describing bar charts. Now you must be very clear about how to describe pie charts. Before we move on to the next session, I would like to ask you another question. Have you noticed the tenses that were used in the above-mentioned samples and examples? When did we use the present tense? When did we use the past tense? You may have the same problem when you write essays based on graphs. So today, we would like to have a summary. Please have a look at the examples listed on the slide. This pie chart represents average weekly family expenses in Britain in 1977. This graph shows the number of full-time teachers of regular schools in China between 1960 and 1990. Oil prices increased from the second quarter of 2000 through to November, but then eased, partly because of the global slowdown. The percentage of American adults who were never married made up 17% of the population. The first 2 sentences use present tense, as we can see from the predicates, represents and shows. What do they have in common? Yes, they are overviews of graphs. The graphs are usually printed on a page or projected on a slide, so they are just in front of their readers. Besides, they are facts. Thus, when we describe the charts, we use present tense. The last 2 sentences use past tense. What do they have in common? Why we have to use past tense here? Let's read them in detail. Oil prices increased from the second quarter of 2000 through to November, but then eased, partly because of the global slowdown. Increased and eased are predicates, followed by a certain time period. As you can see, when the author talked about oil prices, the data were already collected, and that was something happened in the past. So the author used past tense. Pay attention to the time referred to in the chart. Past tense correlates to the time. Besides, the tense of clause corresponds to the main clause. For example, the percentage of American adults who were never married made up 17% of the population in 1970. The past perfect tense could be used in graphic essays too. Let's look at this example. After that peak, these calls had fallen back to the 1995 figure by 2001. This example talks about things happened in the past. From by 2001, we know that the year of 2001 had been passed, so we are talking about the past of the past. Therefore, past perfect tense is applied here. How time flies, let's sum up. Today, we learned how to describe pie charts. The main feature of writing about pie charts is the expressions of percentages. We read an essay and summarize the useful expressions in particular. The verbs, they are, account for, make up, represent, and constitute. Next, we did an exercise describing a pie chart and reading an example. Finally, we talked about tenses of graphic writing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.